Advanced TV Herstory, where hearty discussions of all things TV draws a smart circle around the women who've made it all happen. In each installment, we'll celebrate, educate, illustrate, or analyze, all in hopes of reaching listeners with the message that TV and women are very much a part of our lives, and we like talking about them. Revisit great moments or legacies of talented women. It's all a ticket to inspiration and aspiration. So find this podcast alongside the great ones at Core Temp Arts Network, at Libsyn, Google Music, iTunes, and Auto Radio. Engage with us on Twitter. Our handle is @TV Herstory. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Enjoy. For much of the first decade of the 21st century, the TV network UPN churned out a handful of series that featured predominantly African American casts and were written or directed by, or both, by African American men and women. Today, let's talk about Girlfriends, the series which aired from 2000 to 2008. Or better yet, let's hear from the show's creator, Mara Brock Akil, from a little audio that I pulled from an interview posted on YouTube in the account of Madame Noir. And then we'll hear from two millennials, and this is really the crux of this particular episode, who have given Mara Brock Akil's show, Girlfriends, a whole new forum for discussion.
My goal, to show women as we are. We aren't perfect. We are in a positive image and we are not a negative image. We are women. And we deserve to be flawed and vulnerable and strong and powerful and funny and messed up. I wanted to say something else. And still be worth rooting for. And that's what we put into those ladies. I put everything I had in that show. And I gave my best. And I think I'm very, and as did they. You don't do it alone.
All right. Well, when I'm not doing science stuff at work all day, I fell into podcasting last year, just kind of on Twitter, just trying to find some folks that I could talk to about comics and other fandoms that I enjoyed. So after starting my own podcast, the Lemonade Podcast, I was just really randomly tweeting one day, like, hey, why isn't there a podcast dedicated to the show Girlfriends? Because we frequently talk about it a lot on the timeline, especially with Issa Rae's show.
Insecure
was getting ready to debut. So I'm like, why is there not a Girlfriends podcast? So I tweeted out, hey, would anybody be interested in doing one? Half serious, half not. And then Liz actually hit me up and I was like, great. I'm new to podcasting. This is still fun. Let's figure this out. And this is kind of how Girlfriends came about and how I've turned into just a person that listens to podcasts to actually producing them.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to echo the same story. Just I was the person who reached out because everything between me and Steph has started with a tweet, I think. And she was tweeting about Girlfriends, and I'm like, I like Girlfriends. And then I responded back to her. Well, actually, it starts with a tweet with us, and then it's like sliding into the DMs, the direct messages for your listeners who don't know what DMs is. And so once I was like, yeah, let's do this podcast. And so she messages me and she's like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Maybe that was naive because I didn't know anything about podcasting, but it's been extremely fun to revisit Girlfriends.
Anyone familiar with social media knows it's pretty obvious that Twitter has the power to bring people of like mind and interest together. Stephanie Williams and Elizabeth Ajunwa, who I interviewed earlier this month, started a podcast to further explore that for-female show that remains incredibly relevant, Girlfriends. Stephanie describes herself as an unapologetic blurred blogger and podcaster. She hosts or co-hosts 3 podcasts: the Lemonade Podcast, Misty Knight's Uniformed Afro, and the one we're going to discuss further here, it's called Let Go, Let Flow. Stephanie's outspoken and razor sharp on the matters of representation of Black women in comics and other fandoms. and her colleague, Elizabeth Ajunwa, you may know as Liz the Movie Girl, and she's a podcaster, film lover, and advocate of diverse representations in the media. And in her spare time, she co-hosts Let Go, Let Flow, the podcast that we're going to discuss further. And Liz contributes to YouTube via a popular nerd media outlet called Black Girl Needs, and co-hosts a web show called BGN Talks, which contains movie reviews, nerd culture, connecting the dots for those who are too busy to be looking. So, about that podcast, Let Go, Let Flow.
Okay, yeah, so our format is we basically recap 2 episodes of the Girlfriends show of the season, and then at the end of our show, we'll talk about a character that we feel that we related to the most in each episode, and we kind of got that based off of different quizzes online. So that's it. We just recap 2 episodes, and then we say who we related to the most or which girlfriend we are that day. And that's the format of our show. And we also integrate, I guess, our own life stories and what we relate to along with the girlfriends.
Find us on SoundCloud. You can also find us on iTunes and also Google Play. So for all of those, it's Let Go, Let Flow. Just search that and we should pop up.
Mm-hmm.
These 2 are podcast veterans. They know their SEO, so I bet you 2 are wondering how it is that a podcast about 4 women, about the 4 girlfriends, about a TV show named Girlfriends, ended up being called Let Go, Let Flow. I inquired.
So we were trying to come up with names, and I went ahead and just Liz had Let Go, Let Flow. I'm like, you know what? I like that. And she initially thought that was something that Maya had said during the show. Well, she wasn't totally incorrect. It's just that the actress, is it Golden Brooks?
Golden Brooks.
Golden Brooks. Why am I thinking Glenlyn? Golden Brooks actually does say that, but it's in the movie Something New that stars Sanaa Lathan. So I figured, well, we might as well just go with it because it's still kind of tied to it. And the name had grown on me. So I said, you know what, forget it. People that are fans of the movie Something New will get their reference, but if not, it is what it is.
Yeah, also a four woman format movie.
There are certainly hundreds of podcasts out there that are dedicated to advancing the conversation about a single TV series. Stephanie and Liz, to my knowledge, are the only team conducting a deep and methodical analysis of Girlfriends. And I was intrigued by the notion that at some point they'd run out of episodes. It was only 8 seasons long. And so these episodes about our 4 favorite ladies, where does that take us? What would Stephanie and Liz do then?
At this point, which we're only a few months in, we're just really open to finding other people who are interested in Girlfriends and maybe just at least getting through the seasons. I think that those are my goals anyway. Wait, Steph, what do you think?
Same goals, but honestly, I actually did kind of start thinking, so what happens when we finish this up? And there are some other shows that actually aired on UPN that I would be kind of interested in revisiting. So maybe one of those is Moesha. What was the other one? 101. There's the other Half and Half. So
Yeah.
there's some other shows on UPN that I kind of do want to discuss because I feel like that was a really interesting time period as far as like the shows that came out and the fact that they were all so Black centric on that one network is just because, that's what I remember watching when I was in elementary school, junior high is Go Home, UPN. That's where you're going to see a lot of, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because I think that's what got us to even think of Girlfriends is there was this whole slew of shows that were there and then disappeared. And now there's been kind of this renaissance of Black people on television. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of wanting to look back to see, there was a time where it felt like this on TV. And I think Girlfriends is definitely a show that was like that, just like Moesha, just like some of the other UPN shows.
Loyal listeners of Advanced TV Herstory may recall an extensive interview I conducted with media and gender studies professor Dr. Wendy Burns Ardolino. She teaches in Michigan and wrote a book recently about the shows that depict 4 strong female characters and their similarities, and how their fans relate to them. Because usually those 4 strong female characters are within a standard, a set of behaviors and traits and characteristics that most everyone can relate to. And it's all very cool stuff. It's fun to talk about. Now, the professor included girlfriends in her study and in her book. So Liz and Steph and I discussed how the 4 characters from Girlfriends, Joan, Maya, Tony, and Lynn, are distinct, and how they stack up when compared with 4 women of another sitcom about 4 African American women living single.
Girlfriends, the format was 4 friends, 4 female friends. The kind of leader of the show was Joan Clayton, played by Tracee Ellis Ross. Then we have, I guess, the next person. I don't know if, I guess it's kind of Joan is the lead character, and then everyone kind of falls under that. I guess who you probably think of next is Tony Childs, who was played by Jill Marie Jones. Then we have Maya Wiltz, played by Golden Brooks, and she's kind of the young one in the group, is also Joan's assistant, but good friend. And then we have Persia White, who is college friends with Tony and Joan, and that's how she fits into the group. And she's kind of this earthy, free spirit character. So there's, and I guess if we would break down how the characters' personalities are, Joan is kind of, I guess, an uptight lawyer, very serious, very neurotic at times. Tony is maybe a bit prissy and superficial at times. Maya is a family woman who is more down to earth. And like I said, with Persia White, who played Lynn, Circe, she is a free spirit, and that's pretty much the format. And Girlfriends kind of worked as maybe a response to Sex and the City. So it's kind of like a Black version of Sex and the City. They kind of mirror those characters if you're looking for kind of a model of a 4 female format show that was around that same time. It kind of looks a little bit like that.
I would even compare it to the Golden Girls too at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Living Single is put down as four female format shows sometimes, but I always kind of compared it as like the predecessor to Friends, because so I guess other than it being a Black show, and then it was very centered around those women, they did have these 2 male characters that were very much a part of the show as well. So I don't compare it as much, but definitely not as much love giving to Living Single, because I love that show too.
I would say that you can, I guess Khadijah would be Joan.
Mm-hmm.
Maxine would. Oh, that's a
no. Well, yeah, I don't think it matches up.
No, it doesn't. I thought it did for a second, but it kind of doesn't.
Yeah, but Tony would be Maxine would probably be Tony and Joan.
Yeah, and then Regine would be Maxine, and Regine and Maxine could be Tony.
Yeah,
it's a maybe they're hybrids of them.
See, one thing about, and we talk about this on the podcast, which I think is always a really good thing, is that the characters in Girlfriends were very fleshed out. So it's hard to kind of put them in a box of this is exactly how they were, because they were fully fleshed out characters. And that's the same thing with Living Single. You got to see these very multifaceted women living life and living in the city. So I think that's a good thing, that we can't really say this character would be this, because they had really fleshed out personalities.
As we discussed ways in which Girlfriends depicted friendship among women, we mulled over the value of Los Angeles as its location.
And maybe that's something we should totally address, because this show does feel very different because of its setting. It's very stark because of its setting. And I guess we've never talked about that. Because I think even their dating issues or the things that they go through are very, very LA.
Girlfriends was on for 8 seasons. Sadly, its last season ended abruptly. We'll talk more about that in a minute. In the 9 years since this show aired, however, which many claim that it ran well below the general public's radar, these 4 actresses have in fact remained in the public eye. So when Steph and Liz are recording their analysis of a Girlfriends episode, they do so in the context of these 4 main characters as well as the careers of the actresses who brought them to life. These 2 know their stuff.
To be honest, like when I first started watching Girlfriends, I didn't know that that was Diana Ross's daughter. To my credit, I was only 10 or 11, so thought that was pretty cool. My mom probably told me, she was like, yeah, that's Diana Ross's daughter. So I thought that was pretty cool. And it's just been really, I guess I've kind of grown up with Tracee because she's been in other shows that I've watched a lot.
Yeah, piggybacking off of what Stephanie was saying, yeah, I had no idea that was Diana Ross's daughter when I was introduced to the show. It kind of seems like Tracee, she had roles like Girlfriends was her first breakout role. That was and I think is something she's still known for today. And she's, even after Girlfriends, has had steady work and steady success, and she's probably in the most successful moment at this time. She recently won a Golden Globe for her portrayal of Beau in ABC's Blackish, which is also a very popular show right now. So she's been very successful with her run in Girlfriends and afterward.
So I'll take Jill since I had that. Jill Marie Jones, she's actually had steady work since Girlfriends. And I guess if you don't watch things like Ash and the Evil Dead and Sleepy Hollow, you wouldn't have known that. But she's actually really, really good in Ash and the Evil Dead. She's actually the reason why I started watching it.
Yeah.
And she plays like a cop or a detective, and it's like really outside of what we know of her from Girlfriends. So that's something that I do highly recommend to people to watch because she's really funny in that too.
Yeah, and she did this really interesting movie called Drool after her time in Girlfriends, or maybe she was like ending and she did that. So she's had some interesting work. I think probably Tracee is the most recognizable still of everyone on the show, but Jill Marie Jones is definitely out there. Persia White is currently on a CW show, so she didn't go too far away from where she was with Girlfriends. She is on Vampire Diaries, and she's been working, I think, more independent stuff, more TV stuff, but her role is very different in Vampire Diaries. It's a more serious, more role, not as much comedy. So that's where she is right now. So if anyone's looking for her, because I know a lot of people on Twitter are always like, where's Persia? She's on Vampire Diaries. Golden Brooks is been doing independent movies and some TV, and the latest thing she's done was, or I guess most significant outside of more independent stuff, is a show Blunt Talk that starred Sir Patrick Stewart. So she was a character on that just recently. Yeah.
Going back to the professor's work on 4 female theory, most TV shows that feature 4 strong female characters identify one as a leader. Think about Julia Sugarbaker from Designing Women, or Khadija from Living Single, or Dorothy from The Golden Girls. I was curious to hear from Steph and Liz how Joan Clayton, played by Tracee Ellis Ross, compares. Do they relate to Joan? And do they relate to Joan the way that others in previous generations, in previous decades, related to those other identifiable leaders?
Well, for sure. I think, of course, everyone can relate to wanting family and career. And I feel like Joan is someone that I've kind of attached myself to in that regard. Even though Joan's not married yet or doesn't have any kids, but, just that balance of I want to strive and climb the corporate ladder, but at the same time, I do want family. Well, now I have family, but just balancing that life and, when do you draw the line in the sand for either work or home, and how do you kind of dance around with the two and no one feels left out? You don't feel left out and your loved ones don't. So in that way, Joan's character, I feel like a lot of people can universally relate to.
Girlfriends fans know full well that the series ended abruptly, without a finale. The entire series, not just the season. We discussed the implications and the possible reasons why UPN shut it down. It was a really solid show, and it covered topics considered sensitive then, and some might say are even more sensitive today, because now we are in this highly charged, polarized culture. Could its legacy simply be its relevance?
I know a lot of people are upset about it, given Me Too. And then it kind of feels like it fits in line with a lot of Black shows, unfortunately. Like, I feel like Girlfriends is definitely not the only one that had just abruptly been taken away. Moesha was definitely one of those. And I'm blanking on others, but it just, I don't know, like, I'm upset about it, but at the same time, like, I'm just not surprised. And I know there is a lot of people wanted a Girlfriends movie to kind of wrap things up. So maybe we'll get that one day, but I don't know how I feel about it for sure. Other than upset, like, I don't know how I feel about it yet because we haven't gotten that far along. And to be honest, I don't know how much of the later seasons I actually remember.
Because that's one thing with us doing this podcast. It's not just for us to just be like fans of it, but to kind of revisit it and see if we even remember like it. Because me and Steph were pretty young when the show was out. So it's like we watched it when it was in syndication, and then we still are revisiting it. But I know, just like, I guess what you were talking about, Steph, of like a lot of Black shows just ended abruptly. And I'm thinking about even currently, like shows get canceled all the time. They end abruptly all the time. And so it happens, but it really sucks, especially but that's rare for a show that's been on for almost 8 seasons to just have no ending. It feels like you really didn't care about that audience that had been built up for so long. Whereas, like, I guess we can use an example of a show that just got canceled recently, Underground, which is in limbo right now. That only had 2 seasons, and yes, it had an audience, but I guess you can still kind of recover from that. Even in just the seasons me and Steph have watched so far, you really do care about these characters, and to see it not have an ending, I feel like that is just. I think Tracee Ellis Ross said this once when she was responding. She was like, I think it was just rude.
Well, and really quickly, because you just brought up Underground, the similarities are actually, there is a similarity there, because Underground has been, is in limbo right now because another company has bought, is it CW? There's something changing with management there. Yeah. And the same thing happened with UPN when CW bought UPN out. So it's just kind of interesting that in both of those cases that, both whoever, bought these these networks, networks,
yeah.
They wanted to go in a different direction, and therefore these shows have been kind of left twisting in the wind. Hopefully Underground finds a home, unlike Girlfriends didn't, but we'll see.
Yeah.
There's no question that as a show oriented around the lives of women, the writers did a great job on focusing on the conflicts, challenges, and celebrations that occur 365 days a year in the life of women. To watch the show today, and it's available on YouTube and on DVDs and online at a site called www.cwseed, so CWSEED.com. Anyway, it's to appreciate how much the focus in this series was on the people and the interactions, and not really so much on the surroundings.
And I think maybe to add on to that, it might have been also what you were saying about it taking place in a different space, because a lot of Black shows take place in a New York or a city type place where Girlfriends was more of a suburban show. And I think that was something that UPN was kind of doing, was showing more suburban Black people, which I don't think, I mean, Steph, you can talk about this, but I don't think I saw much of that until Girlfriends and until UPN was doing what they were doing.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally agree because I'm just thinking of Family Matters, and that took place in Chicago. And that was one of the more prominent shows I remember. And I'm thinking,
Right.
no, like a lot of them, like you just said, a lot of them took place in a city, like a big city type setting. Even the Wayans brothers, that
Right.
show took
It was
place in
always
New
a
York.
city. It's
Yeah.
always New York. Like only Black people, because that's the thing, right? Black people only live in the hood. They only live in the city.
Yeah.
Basically, urban is synonymous with Black people. So to kind of see Black people living in the suburbs, kind of, having to drive places, that was kind of new for me anyway. So,
Here. And I
mhm.
thought that was, and that's what, and to me, that's also what makes it unique as well. And you're right,
Yeah.
UPN had a lot of that because Moesha, suburbs
Yeah.
of Cali, yeah, all of that,
Hmm.
one-on-one suburbs.
Yep. For me, Girlfriends just I'm really big on representation, and I said this earlier, now we're seeing a lot of Black people on TV. But after that UPN era, there was not an example of different types of Black women on TV. I mean, really, all you got was the sassy Black assistant on a show. I mean, you can pretty much like go through the shows and see like the token Black person that they had there who had no personality, no depth, nothing really significant to them. And to be able to go back and see that there were these women who were successful, had struggles, had mess ups and successes. It really, I feel like that type of legacy is why Girlfriends was referenced in shows during the time it was on and is referenced now in 2017. So I think that's the legacy that it has and will continue to have.
And it's impacting current shows. Insecure. You watch, there's no way you can watch Insecure and not think of Girlfriends, and that it wasn't even inspired in some way by Girlfriends. Molly looks like Jo Marie Jones.
Jill, yeah. And it takes place in LA. It's dealing with a lot of the same type of issues. So, yeah, Girlfriends definitely has a legacy.
Perhaps it's the fresh conversation among women. They're allowed to talk candidly about topics of the day. Watch Girlfriends or Designing Women or some episodes of The Golden Girls, and you're in for dialogue created by minds that are willing to challenge the status quo. We talked about a particularly memorable episode from Girlfriends.
So there is an episode that is not necessarily my favorite episode, but it's one that I think is a talking point for a lot of people who don't care for Girlfriends, because we've discovered that as we've been doing the show. And
Oh,
it
yes.
came as a shocker to me, but then I had to face reality, like, well, duh, people don't like things that you like, and that's totally okay. But the episode, I can't think of the name of it, but it's an episode where Joan's friend comes to visit, and she actually has HIV. And in this episode, they kind of dive into it, and there's a lot of kind of tropey things that happen. I think she ends up cutting herself with a knife, and Joan throws it away. And at the end of the episode, she, of course, takes the knife out of the trash can because I believe she comes to a revelation, along with everyone else, that you're being silly about contracting HIV from her. That's not how it works. And a lot of people don't like the way that episode was handled.
And if it weren't for you, I would be the one that was married. I would be the one with 2 kids, and I would be living your happy life.
You want my happy life?
Yes.
You want Brian?
Yes.
Fine, you can have him. And you can have the AIDS he gave me too.
I'm evil. I yelled at a dying woman.
I can't even imagine what she's going through. 2 kids, right?
Oh, shoot. And I'm godmother to one of those kids. Am I legally bound? I only agreed to that in a ceremonial sense. I ain't seen that child in years.
Tony, this woman is sick, and you're sitting over there worrying about how this affects you?
What? I'm not good with death. Or kids.
Oh my God. You guys, Reese saved my life. If she hadn't taken Brian, that could have been me.
Oh! And Tony Childs is being selfish. What about this heifer? But seriously, Lynn, if anything happens, you gotta take my godchild with yours. They're like puppies, they need another one to play with.
Tony, you need to get down on your knees and repent. And Joan, stop feeling guilty. It's just another way for you to make it about you. We need to be thinking about Reese right now, not feeling sorry for her. Because right now she's very much alive. We need to focus on that. She doesn't need to be reminded every 5 minutes that she's sick.
Like I said, I don't really remember it, and we haven't gotten there yet, but I'm actually kind of wanting to get to the episode because I just really want to watch it and dissect and just kind of understand where they're coming from. And then, was Mara trying to speak to the ignorance that people have, or is this a case of when it aired, the timing? I'm just really curious because I just want to know what plays into that and, what turned people off so much.
Going back to the 80s, pick a series, any series, as long as its writers have a social conscience. You can bet your bottom dollar that an HIV conversation was quite likely had as a plotline. As were so many that challenged the norms of the day, HIV was a very hot topic. And that takes us back to why a podcast such as Let Go, Let Flow, that offers up a deep discussion from this award-winning series, is really so sorely needed and worth subscribing to. You're going to hear Steph and Liz talk about all of these important social issues, even ones that aren't necessarily live today or as engaging today, but they were at the time. And at the time, it takes you back to whenever that was. What were the conversations at your family's dining room table?
Actually, a lot of the things I remember, we've been coming up in season 2. Yeah. And I think right now, just because it's really fresh in my mind, we recently watched, I think it was episode 13, where Lynn's sister comes to town, and she is, we call her Rachel Dolezal, but she's just like a little confused about her identity. And it's just something that is a conversation I think a lot of people are having, and what Blackness is, and what's white, what's Black, what's the right way to act around people. And I think this one just is really in my mind right now because the conversation about whether or not white people can use the N-word, they were having this in 2002, and it's 2017, and we're literally having this same conversation, especially with Bill Maher and that whole thing that's going on right now. It's just really interesting that that's just so it's like still a thing. It's still a thing. And we've been watching these shows for the past few months, and it will be like something will come up and it will like mirror what's going on in the news. So it just shows how relevant Girlfriend still is.
Yeah, because there was that episode we watched where Joan and William were supposed to represent it was a soda company, and you had an athlete that was protesting, thinking of Colin Kaepernick. So it's so far, because that's been the case, to me, that tells me that Girlfriends is a show that definitely deserves to remain relevant, because you go back and you watch shows that are 15 years old and they're still relevant.
So, with a fresh set of eyes, rewatching a show they first saw as middle schoolers, Steph and Liz are uniquely suited to bring new meaning and insight to many of the topics that the Girlfriends series explored. Like the character of Yvonne. Now, Yvonne appeared in the early seasons, and if you've watched these seasons, you couldn't help but have an opinion about Yvonne and William and their relationship. And if you haven't, then buckle up, do a binge, grab the DVDs, or go online and watch the first seasons of Girlfriends, because William and Yvonne are a study.
So we just talked about this one too. And I think this one really, really got to me just because I remembered this episode, and because it's a it's a sitcom trope where someone is left at the altar, but for me and Steph, we were both happy that William, he's a character. We haven't really talked about William, but he's kind of the main guy character in the show. And he's left at the altar by Yvonne, a woman he was seeing, but never introduced to his mother. Didn't know, wasn't pronouncing her name right the whole time they were together, and she gave up her job for him. And so it was like all this drama, for me, I was very happy that she ends up leaving him.
Because this is a situation that's still relatable for a lot of people, where marriage is played up as the end all be all. And I think at one point Yvonne says something about, their happiness is her happiness, but her happiness isn't, hers. And that's why she ended up giving up her job. And that's a conversation that's happening today as we, I guess, as millennials start to shift focus on what's priority and what's not, and what traditional values, we want to hold on to and what we don't. So actually, the whole Yvonne storyline to me itself could probably be, that could be like a single 4 or 5 podcast episodes dedicated just to that.
If you never caught Girlfriends the first time around, or at any time that it might have appeared in syndication, now is your chance to get in on the conversation. Use Steph and Liz's podcast, Let Go, Let Flow, as the companion to your progress, starting in with the very first season, which is the season that they are just concluding. So you're right on track. And remember, too, that you can find it on YouTube at cwseed.com, cwseed.com, or snap up the full series on DVD and watch it with some family member. Have some fun with this. Whether the episodes were fluffy or deep, the award-winning actresses and writers and producers delivered a quality show. Steph and Liz with Let Go, Let Flow are keeping that conversation alive, and they're bringing insights a dozen years later about those very themes that are universal, like loyalty and fidelity and family, trust, judgment, work, and dreams.
It is available on iTunes and SoundCloud, and also available on Google Play. And you just type in Let Go, Let Flow, Let Go, Let FLO flow, and you should be able to find it. No, I mean, listen to the podcast. We're still learning about Girlfriends. So if anyone's interested in the show, they should definitely listen and follow along. We're on Twitter, so tweet along with us and follow us. We're always willing to talk about Girlfriends. My personal one is at Liz the Movie Girl, but we also have Let Go _Let Flow is the on Twitter, our official Twitter.
Oh, I guess I'll go ahead and get my personal my personal Twitter handle is Steph_I_Will.
It was great fun having Steph and Liz on Advanced TV Herstory. Just as they found each other on Twitter, I was scrolling my feed one day and found a tweet promoting one of their episodes. I was totally intrigued and immediately reached out to see if they'd bring their insights to this podcast. So thank you, ladies, for being with us today. We wish them all the best as they grow their audience and find new meaning in a great show. It will become a classic. And thanks to you, loyal listeners, for engaging in this installment of Advanced TV Herstory. Subscribe on iTunes or at our hosting site Libsyn. Listen directly from a player by going to tvherstory.com, which is also where you can leave feedback on Girlfriends or any other show that featured 4 strong women characters. So by a player, I simply mean pull up that iPad, go to www.tvherstory.com. Have your nice old aunt with you as well, so that when she sees the title she wants to listen to, you literally hit the play button and she's good to go. Wouldn't that be cool? All right, so while you are at the podcast website, you will also find scripts and notes. It's all good stuff. This podcast is a member of Core Temp Arts Network, and that's a place where you will find shows, podcasts, just like Let Go, Let Flow. because they deliver deep analysis, episode by episode, of quality TV series. And they are produced by independent podcasters like myself. So go to www.coretemparts.com. And since all roads lead to Twitter and amazing friendships can often be attributed to that platform, follow this podcast at TV Herstory. Music from our introduction comes from that invaluable resource, freemusicarchive.org, and we continue to feature the work of Jazzer in a clip called Take Me Higher that we pulled from Free Music Archive. And don't we sound jazzy? Jazzer. Audio wizardry for this and most segments of Advanced TV Herstory is conducted by the wizard himself, David Brown. So, loyal listeners, thank you for being a part of Advanced TV Herstory. Do stay in touch. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.
Thank you for listening to the Court Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court Arts shows, visit courtemparts.com.